Have you ever felt stuck? Like you're staring at a blank page and an empty canvas or a plan that simply refuses to come together. The harder you try, the more it feels like creativity itself is slipping further and further from your reach. That's like playing a game that you don't understand. But maybe that's the catch. What if creativity isn't meant to be seized and conquered? What if it wasn't meant to be controlled? What if it's something that emerges when you step back from forcing and simply allow it to rise? I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Transcendent, where we explore spaces between who you are and who you feel that you're meant to be. My life has been much about questioning everything around me, questions and also finding answers, shaped by experiences with mentors, mystics, in moments of clarity only adversity has revealed to me. For some time now, creativity has fascinated me, not the polished and commercialized version that we see presented to us, but the raw, unfiltered energy that bubbles up in its purest form. Today, we're just going to discuss the role of innocence and how that plays in the creative process and why creativity doesn't need to be chased, but allowed to unfold naturally. Well, in the teachings of Rave Cosmology VIII, they tell us something profound that really aligns with many spiritual teachings, including those, of Jesus in the Bible. And they're profound and they often get overlooked in a world obsessed with performance. Well, Ra Uru Hu reminded me that creativity is not an act of doing, it's an expression of being, much like Gurdjieff described. It's not about adding layers of effort to create something new, but stripping away the noise so that what's inherently within you can reveal itself. Creativity at its core is innocence. It's the natural flow experienced when we stop trying to control everything and instead surrender to what already exists within us. Think of a child at play. They don't plan their next move or strategize how to make something perfect. They act from a place of curiosity, instinct, passion, presence. They live in the creative flow because they haven't yet been taught to push or shove or dominate for a particular outcome. The process, well, it's about the process rather than the result. And that's their inner joy expressing itself. This childlike quality is what Rave Cosmology VIII refers to when describing the innocent nature of raw creativity. But as we grow older, society conditions us to see creativity as something we must perform rather than something that we live. This performance mentality is part of the not self story or self betrayal that rave cosmology and even the Bible speaks of so often as really missing the mark or sinning. We start to believe that creativity is tied to our net worth or our self-worth or how others see us or where we live or what kind of car that we drive or what kind of clothes that we wear. It's tied to a thing that's measured, refined, and sold. Yes, sold. And that's where we become slaves. and betray ourselves. And the more that we believe this lie, the more you believe that lie, the further you stray from the truth of who you really are naturally as a creative being. And we begin to distrust our ability to create simply because the result doesn't match what society has conditioned falsely for us to value. But innocence is the creative process, or innocence in the creative process reminds us that it isn't about society's standards, it's about the raw, undiluted essence of what emerges when you finally stop trying so hard. And here's the paradox: the harder that you attempt to force creativity, the more we stifle it, and the more frustrated and angry part of you becomes. And it's like holding water in your hands. You grip it too tightly and it escapes between your fingers. Creativity thrives in a state of openness where judgment and self-criticism don't have the final say. And this openness is innocence. It's waiting without expectation, letting go of the form, letting the form emerge without preconceptions, and trusting the process even when the outcome remains uncertain. Rave Cosmology VIII speaks of creativity as something deeply tied to the body, to the vehicle through which creation flows. When we align with our design, the natural rhythms of creativity reveal themselves effortlessly. But this isn't to say the process is easy or linear. Creativity often emerges through tension. These survival patterns are not easy to break. These robotic patterns that have been passed down from generation to generation are certainly something not to be taken lightly. But that tension through those innocence can be transcended. And the key is how to engage with that tension. You have to use patience instead of seeking performance and control. You have to use curiosity instead of control. And I've learned this not just through reading and through study, but through experience. During some of the most difficult and dark periods of my life, I found myself trying harder than ever to create meaning through sheer effort. But the more that I forced it, the further I got from what I felt I really needed or wanted. And the emptier that my work became, it wasn't until I allowed myself to stop and reconnect with the simple act of noticing that creativity returned when I let go, when I surrendered. And it came in ways that I couldn't predict. It came in spaces and in lumps. It wasn't actively, in places that I was looking. This is creativity as innocence. It shows up when you're not expecting, when you're not watching. It arises when you're not chasing. To be clear, you do need to be watching, but maybe not living with a plan where you expect and you're looking for that, what you feel like your mind wants to walk through that door. It's a different kind of watching that you may have been raised, where you're just being and aware. When you're not chasing, think of any truly great work of art, any moment or profound intention or insight that you may have stumbled across in your life. Most of these, when we look deeper, weren't devised in some plan or in a result of a particular effort, but in moments of pure presence. Einstein's theory of relativity wasn't born from endless struggle. It came through quiet contemplation. And Van Gogh's Starry Night wasn't a calculated move, but an expression of what was already present within him, waiting to be released. The creative process is less about doing and more about allowing and being. It's learning from the tension without demanding immediacy. It's observing the form life wants to take through you rather than dictating the shape of your life and what it must make to adhere to some old standard. But this requires trust. Trust in your design, trust in your process, trust in yourself, even when, and perhaps especially when the path forward feels very uncertain. What's most liberating about this approach to creativity is how accessible it is. You don't need to be a creative person in the traditional sense that we label others as artists or actors or singers or celebrities to live a creative life. Creativity shows up at every aspect of living. And the way that you solve a problem at work may very well reveal your creativity to you. That problem that you solved at work, to how you control a friend, to the idea that may have actually started absently at staring at a coffee cup. Well, when creativity is viewed as innocence, as the byproduct of surrender, well, it stops being something about being exclusive or as a repetitive result. It becomes something that's deeply human. What would happen if you stopped forcing your next big idea and instead made space for it to arrive on its own? Imagine the weight that this could lift and the clarity that it might bring. And not only to your process, but to your life as a whole. Innocently, creativity teaches us to not just create, but to live more freely and to be alive, to engage with life out of curiosity rather than pressure. This isn't to say that you won't face resistance. You will. The mind in this era is conditioned to control. And, it's going to be aligned with, against, and opposing some innocence along this path. But as you use the innocence and this path, you back away from being a performer, of faking it and betraying yourself. This is a dance that you don't need to return to again and again. But with every step that you make along this organic and natural process, you'll feel the difference between struggle and force versus allowing, between trying to bend life to your will or to the old way of your mind and letting life shape itself through you. Today, ask yourself this: what would it look like to create with curiosity rather than control? To trust the natural flow of what's within you, to step into the creative innocence that's you've always carried and maybe haven't always used or accessed or even yet remembered. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent. Wishing you all the best.